Welcome to the Butter Notes podcast with three guys who have no business listening to music, much less talking about it. All right, welcome back to the Butter Notes podcast. Jim here. We are going to talk about a jazz rock starter pack today, a 70s jazz rock starter pack to be specific, as that would be the golden age considered by most, I would say.
Tone, do you want to tell us why jazz rock differs from jazz fusion? Because I'm still highly skeptical, but I'll buy whatever you tell me.
All right, that was Jake who just talking. I told him to introduce himself. He didn't do it. This is Tone talking now. I knew that Jake was going to start this with wanting to start some debate about the difference between jazz rock and jazz fusion. The difference is small.
For our dedicated viewers, they might have some of the same reservations as me.
The difference is very small, and it's really qualitative and not quite quantitative. I can't really list bullet points as to the differences. Generally, jazz fusion is looser. It's more improvisational. It's more long form. Whereas jazz rock is tighter. It's composed. Obviously, there's still some improv in jazz rock, but not as much. It's more composed. It's tighter. The tracks are shorter, and that's really the main difference. Honestly, the difference isn't huge, but if you listen to Bitches Brew and then you listen to Romantic Warrior, it's different. The two, they're not the same genre. It's not exactly the same genre. There's a lot similar, but they're not. If you put those two records side to side, you can't say it's 100% the same style of music because it's pretty different, in my opinion, and I think probably in most people's opinion. Another example.
Yeah. Now I think someone might come back at you and say, yeah, but the difference, the difference there is also of 6-7 years. So you might look at the difference between Intermounting Flame and Bitches Brew, and I think the difference is still pretty obvious. There's a punchiness and a heaviness to it, and a tightness. That's a good way to put it. That's really different from the classic.
I always just assumed that fusion meant a combining of jazz with some other genre by which it's influenced, and I just took jazz rock to be a particular subset because when you look at a lot of jazz fusion lists, you'll find a lot of the same sort of records on jazz rock lists, but there's not complete overlap. I see Steely Dan and Chicago included on jazz rock lists, but I don't think anyone would confuse them for being fusion.
Yeah.
But something maybe like one of the albums we'll talk, or maybe a couple of the albums we'll talk about later on the list. I think maybe the last two actually would maybe show up on fusion lists, but and on jazz rock lists as well.
I hear you, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I always just assumed it was a subset because I've seen people describe jazz metal or something like that before too. So I just thought it was a subset, but it doesn't really matter. I was just curious.
I actually think it does kind of matter because there are some really important jazz fusion albums from the 70s we're not talking about on this episode. Bitches Brew is an example. Crossings by Herbie Hancock is another example. Mm-hmm. Really, really important albums. They're not on this starter pack because we're focusing more on the jazz rock side of things for this starter pack. As we get later into the 70s, as Jim kind of mentioned, jazz rock really, it becomes more of the mainstream as opposed to fusion. Starting with Intermounting Flame, it's a little bit closer to the middle of the two of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. As we move forward chronologically, the albums become more clearly jazz rock and less fusion. So talking about that a little bit at the intro makes sense.
Yeah, well, why don't we dive in here? Got number one, The Intermounting Flame by the Mahavishnu Orchestra from 1971. And I think it's worth mentioning I think there's a couple of Miles alumni on this album. So John McLaughlin, obviously, who put Mahavishnu Orchestra together, but hadn't some other guys in this group played on some of the Miles stuff?
Did Jan Hammer play with him?
Obviously. Let's when we start each album, let's list off the lineup for each album we talk about for this episode because it's important with this genre.
That's a good call.
So
it is.
On the Intermounting Flame, we have McLaughlin on guitar, who's still really young at this point. This came out 71, and McLaughlin was born in 42. So he's 19 years old on this album, which is insane. And he was even younger when he got started with Miles. Then we have Rick Laird on bass, who I don't know a lot about, even though he slaps on this album. Billy Cobham on drums, who's like... Billy Cobham is like the jazz fusion, jazz rock drummer, in my opinion. He's on drums on here. Also another Miles alumnus. Jan Hammer on keyboards. And Jerry Goodman on violin. I don't know much about Jerry
real
Goodman
quick,
either.
it's funny. I was reading about this earlier. Apparently, McLaughlin had wanted Tony Levin to play bass on this, and he had wanted Jean-Luc Ponty to play violin. But they had other gigs.
He gets Ponty later, but I don't think he ever got Levin.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, I wouldn't change.
Ponty.
It was a happy accident then, because I wouldn't change anything about this album. Like, these 5 dudes are a
Indeed.
unit. These 5 dudes are a fucking unit on this thing.
These guys are so tight on all this stuff. It's just fucking scary, man. These they stop on a dime.
Cobham's
They
play those crazy runs just on a just. They should scare metronomes.
McLaughlin's playing on this is relentless. That's the way I'd describe it. I mean, he doesn't let you go at any point during this. Well, I mean, there's some slower tracks, but in the faster tracks, the dude is completely relentless.
There wasn't really any playing like this at the time. I don't know any other guitarist that did anything like this before McLaughlin.
The Noonward Race is unbelievable.
The speed. I mean, what's that?
The Noonward Race. Talking about the speed, the Noonward Race. Race is unbelievable,
Christ.
Especially for 71.
And it's so tight. It's so tight, man. It's scary tight.
Cobham on the Noonward Race, that's one of the best drumming performances on any song I've ever heard.
Absolutely.
Any genre.
Yeah, Cobham is a beast. Oh, he's such a beast, man.
How old was Billy when they recorded this? He probably wasn't too much older either. He was even younger.
I'm not sure.
Cobham was born in 44, and I did my math wrong. They're all in their late 20s, not in their late teens. But they're still young.
I was gonna say I was curious about how old they were, because I know that someone had played with Miles in the 50s, and I'm thinking, well, they're not that old on this record then, unless they were already in their 20s or teens playing with Miles.
No one played with Miles in the 50s.
Or
Miles,
60s, sorry, 60s. My bad.
Yeah, these guys were 12 when Kind of Blue came out. I did my math. They're in their mid to late 20s on here, not their teens. But they're still young.
Still impressive. Still very impressive.
Yeah, this is some wild shit, man. It's funny. There's actually I watched this documentary on YouTube a couple of years ago. It's called The Drummers of Frank Zappa, and Ruth Underwood tells this story about it's post Uncle Meat, and Frank's working on putting together another band. Post Uncle Meat and probably post Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo also. So we're out of the Flo and Eddie years on. Yeah, on the way into the classic the classic band on Apostrophe, Overnight Sensation, etc. And apparently they were out in New York and they saw this band, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, play, and Frank was just like, I gotta get a band that's that tight. I can't move forward unless I get a band that's that tight. And that shows so much. You can see so much of that tightness in something like Apostrophe or Overnight Sensation, especially compared to the earlier Mother stuff.
Yeah, this is an era of music in the early 70s where musicianship is very highly valued. It's in the mainstream. People are clamoring for more and tighter and more technical musicianship in their rock music during this era, which is so different from the no value judgment either way, but it's so different from the current musical zeitgeist. Everyone is trying to outdo each other in this scene at this time, and it's a pretty mainstream scene.
Yep.
This stuff is selling in the early 70s.
Yeah, there was that sort of competitive edge to a lot of this stuff, which is so interesting, because I think that's so frowned upon in the current zeitgeist, for that kind of I don't know, that kind of technical competitiveness between musicians, but it's very obviously there in this stuff. I mean, especially when you consider how much everyone on every album we're going to talk about today played with everyone else.
Well,
Yeah, it's not.
Like there's so much crossover between all of these lineups.
It's not like a dark, like rapacious kind of competition. It's like
No.
they're building
I
each
don't
other
mean that
up
way.
as a group, kind of.
Yeah.
Like everyone in this scene. What would you say? I think McLaughlin's guitar solo on Dawn is my favorite McLaughlin guitar solo, at least on this album. But it's hard to choose. Would you like have like a favorite guitar solo on here? It has to be Dawn for me.
Dawn's a good
amazing.
choice. Yeah, Dawn is. I mean, that guitar solo in Dawn is like it's dead center in that composition. Like it's right in the forefront, and he's got tons of space for it. So I think that's sort of the quintessential McLaughlin solo.
It's a great solo because it's a
anywhere
pretty
he's playing
slow
is crazy.
paced. It's a pretty slow paced and kind of mid tempo, quieter song, and then that solo just like slaps you silly, despite the fact that all the other members are kind of keeping it kind of low key, except for John. And I really love that like dichotomy on that song. Like he's doing this shredding, ripping solo over like kind of a mid-paced rhythm section.
Yeah, I mean the solos on Meeting of the Spirits are incredible.
Was there much of a precedent set for the use of violin in this music, in this kind of like in rock music and in jazz music, in either of them before?
Oh,
Jerry Goodman?
we got violin with some of the Zappa stuff. That's all that occurs to me off the top of my head.
Might have still been
John?
working itself out though, right? Like this was maybe still relatively new, the inclusion of a violin. I talked to my uncle before about this kind of music, and he was, growing up when all this stuff was coming out, and introduced me to Jean-luc Ponty and then to this stuff as well, and said that it was just people went crazy over they couldn't fathom a violin in this kind of music. That was kind of the impression at the time, but I didn't know if that was just like in certain places or if like maybe in music circles it wasn't that surprising, but to the general public it was. In any case, I think it was probably relatively new, and added, I think, a really interesting flair to the music that many people maybe hadn't heard before.
John
violin works beautifully in this style of music.
John McLaughlin, I would speculate that the violin playing on Mahavishnu Orchestra is inspired by John McLaughlin's taste for like South Asian music, like Hindustani music and Punjabi classical music and like raga rock, or just straight up raga music, like basically South Asian music. John McLaughlin is obsessed with that stuff. He's doing the Shakti albums. They came a little bit after this, but he did the Shakti albums, and the Shakti albums are like as good as the Mahavishnu albums. I might even like them more. So like that non-Western influence is really important to keep in mind whenever you listen to anything John McLaughlin. And I think the violin is part of that influence, I would speculate.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I mean, at least on the rock side, I can't think of much else that had any violin going on besides the Zappa stuff.
Yeah, I mean, country and bluegrass had all sorts of
of
fiddle
course.
but yeah, I can't think of anything. Yeah, from the rock side, wouldn't surprise me if it was in the jazz side to some extent, but I can't think of anything in like standard rock music that's like this. I mean, was there anything like this in like Zeppelin? I didn't notice any of it in Deep Purple, or definitely not in Sabbath. So yeah, I can't say.
No, I mean that influence is all in the rhythm section, the drum and bass, I think in particular.
Right.
Because this isn't really riff guitar either. Like the guitar extension is much more jazz oriented than rock, in my opinion. Whereas you can see the obvious rock influence on the drumming and the bass playing in particular. Like, it's not on this album, but think about the Birds of Fire title track. I mean, Cobham practically invented double bass on that track, man. With that constant flutter of bass note, eighth notes in that song.
Yeah, it's
toward like in the mid section.
well, and McLaughlin's guitar and Goodman's violin complement each other so well. It's just like really frenetic, like string piece. I mean, the guitar is functioning almost like just a string instrument in an orchestra in a lot of places, I think, which is really an interesting compositional choice. rather than it just being a vehicle for just writing a really kind of like groovy or catchy riff or memorable riff or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the register difference is between a violin and a guitar, but the fluidity of violin playing, it makes it very it makes at least the leads very separate from the guitar, because the guitar you're playing a fretted instrument. You can't get that same kind of slide between notes that you can get on a violin. You can try to emulate it, but it's never going to sound the same.
Right.
Not without a fretless guitar, which a lot of guys do play.
Which is why I think it has a really nice complement to the guitar playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
And then I mean, not to mention Hammer's kind of spacey atmospheric stuff that's going on that just gives it this highly spiritual. I mean, the whole thing is steeped in kind of mysticism and spirituality. I think McLaughlin had gone on. I don't know. He was training with a yogi or someone in India. It was like had a mentor or something like that. Was highly inspired by that sort of mysticism and stuff. And I think Hammer adds a lot of that with the keys, synths as well.
Did you guys watch that short BBC clip I posted in the Discord?
No,
Where they play Meeting of the Spirits, and there's another one they played too. God damn, watching them do this live just brings it to a whole other level too.
This is music where a lot of the time I'll listen to live renditions of some of these tracks, and I much prefer them actually. And I think there's a live track at the end of this album that is one of my favorites on here. I would say. I think it's the Noonward Race actually, and I preferred the live rendition of it to the studio track.
That would be a bonus track. That's not like part of the album, but I'm sure it's awesome.
Right, yeah. No, it's included on at least one of these issues.
Tell him, what were you going to say there?
Does John still tour?
Dude, he just did a tour a couple of years ago with Jimmy Herring. I think they called it the Meeting of the Spirits tour, and I fucking didn't go, and I'll probably never forgive myself for that one.
You may not get to see him ever again.
About that.
Yeah, I should have gone to that. I will never forgive myself on that one.
What, he's in his 70s now?
Still
crushing it?
He's up there, man. I mean, he was born when? Early 40s?
Yeah, he's probably in his
42.
mid.
So he's
mid 70s.
in his So he's going to be turning 80.
Yeah,
if he hasn't already.
Yep. It's still kicking.
According to Wikipedia, Pat Metheny called McLaughlin the greatest living guitarist, which is pretty high praise.
Yeah, I mean that's a common opinion. He's a good choice. If you want to name one guy, McLaughlin's a good choice.
As a guitarist,
it's between him and Warren DeMartini, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, I mean DeMartini composed a little bit more spiritually fulfilling music in my opinion.
Well, it's just harder to play too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way more appeal to it. But McLaughlin's probably a close second.
McLaughlin just had more appeal to the common man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to be operating on a certain level to understand the riffs of DeMartini.
What were you about to ask me there, Tone?
As a guitarist, Jim, could you describe what makes McLaughlin the best? Can it be verbalized?
I think he's an adventurous guitarist while also still being extremely technical. That's what's so interesting about McLaughlin is it's he's playing very technical, very intricate lines, but he's kind of pushing the edge of it sounding right. There's some quote from some guy about Jimi Hendrix where he's like, Jimi Hendrix would bend the wrong note to make it sound right, and I think there's a lot of that in McLaughlin where it's he's really just he's trying to break out of like sort of normal boundaries of what would work on some of this stuff, but it all just like it wouldn't be right any other way. Not to mention it's all fucking improvised. Like the guy, he's got a unique voice, and there are no rules for his playing. I think that's probably what makes him so great.
Yeah, like that solo on Dawn, like you could almost, like when you listen to it, you can almost like picture like he would just have to do like the tiniest thing wrong for it to like slip and just like totally fail, but it doesn't. It's like perfect. Yeah,
so
I see what you mean.
Yep, and it's like, look, I love Yngwie Malmsteen. A lot of people shit on Yngwie, but Yngwie is the man. But with Yngwie, you pretty much know what he's going to play. Like, it's going to be super fucking tight, super technical, but you know what the notes are going to be. Like, everything works perfectly. It's all very tight. But with McLaughlin, he's every bit as technical, but just pushing the boundaries out of his way.
Yeah, and it's that boundary pushing and that risk taking that makes like an artist like truly great, like the highest tier, like in almost any medium. So, I agree.
At least in terms of finding a voice. I mean, you hear a John McLaughlin solo, you know instantly it's John McLaughlin.
Yeah, and guitarists who are influenced by him, you instantaneously know that he's an influence.
Absolutely. Anything more to say about Intermounting Flame?
Nothing about Intermounting Flame. I think Birds of Fire is another worthy choice, and we actually had that initially, so I just wanted to give a shout to that album too. That's another phenomenal record, and they're 1A and 1B in my opinion.
I totally agree. Yeah, they're the same lineup, same caliber. They're either one of them would have been a perfect entry for this list.
Yeah. Historically, I think this makes the most sense to start with.
Yeah.
And not only because it comes before Birds of Fire, but also just where it's coming out of the 60s. So that makes more sense.
It also comes before everything else on the list here, and I think it sets up the chronology of the list nicely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I like the Intermounting Flame just a little bit more than Birds of Fire, and I always have. But they are albums that are basically on par, but I've always liked the Intermounting Flame just a little more.
Yeah, I actually, if I had to, I'd pick Birds of Fire.
Me too, actually.
You would?
That's the one that introduced me to Mahavishnu. But
here, there's one song on Birds of Fire that is the reason for that, and I'm blanking on it. What is it? Hope. The short song, just under 2 minutes, is what makes me probably pick Birds of Fire.
Hope is
relentless, just relentlessly beautiful.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying anything negative about Birds of Fire at all.
Take it back.
Not going to do it.
Take it back.
You're half a continent away. You can't do anything to me.
We're gonna dial this down a little bit here. We're gonna dial back the dynamic here a little bit, but certainly
still
not
genius in its own way. Still genius in its own way.
Indeed. Oh God. Yeah. I mean, caveat here: every album on this list is a 5 out of 5 tone.
Okay.
Because I know that you disagree.
He's got one on here.
Another perfect album here: Caravanserai. I don't know how you pronounce that, by Santana. 1972.
Let's look at the members on here. There are a lot of people playing.
It's only 2 guys from Journey.
Still the first proto Journey record.
Neil Schon and the singer go on to form Journey after this album.
Greg Raleigh, the organ player, and Neil Schon. Greg Raleigh and Neil Schon are doing a lot on here. They wrote like probably half the album, maybe more than half of it, and like half the solos are Neil. Yeah. Santana like didn't even write the majority of this album. Like, this is a band album. It's not a Carlos Santana album. Which is not me saying anything negative about Carlos Santana. He is the band leader. So like the direction of the music is being directed by him. But in terms of the composition and a lot of the playing, including the guitar playing, like there are several tracks on here where Carlos isn't even on. Like Future Primitive is mainly all a percussion piece. Carlos isn't even on that track. The first track, Eternal Caravan of Reincarnation, Carlos isn't even on that track at all. So, like, this, like, you do have to think of this as a band album. But let me get a list of the members. A lot of people play on here because there are a lot of percussionists.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how many people play bongos on this record? It's a lot. I don't know how many.
So it's Carlos, obviously, Neil Sean. I don't know how to say it. I don't know if it's Scone or Scone. I don't know how to say his name. Greg Raleigh on organ.
It's Sean.
Douglas Roach on bass, who's unbelievable on this album. Douglas Rodriguez, I guess, plays guitar on Waves Within, but that's the only track he plays on. And then a bunch of people, including percussionists, who are only showing up on like a couple songs. So the core of the band is Carlos, Neil, Greg, and Doug Roach on bass. The drumming and the percussion and a lot of the keyboards are like, it's almost like you have to go track by track to figure out who's playing.
Right.
Quite a departure from the sort of classic Santana albums, this one.
It's I mean, in terms of like quality, for me, it's on par with the Braxis, but it's
this is my I prefer this to the
I do
Santana
too. Yeah, maybe not by far, but I definitely prefer it to Abraxas. But that Abraxas was more directed, I think, towards a popular. I mean, it was in the squarely in the counterculture stuff, whereas this is much more subdued. As Anthony said, has more of a group feel to it, and it's much more subdued. It's really smooth, but it's also really tight as well. Like, this is a really tight record, I would say.
He's playing Carlos is playing Latin rock prior to this, and there's a big jazz influence on Latin rock, but like that's what he's playing before this album. He's playing Latin rock. That's the genre. And then here, like, there's still a big Latin influence on here, but there's also a huge African influence, a Caribbean influence. The international influence expands on here, and it's more in the jazz medium than anything. Like, this isn't a Latin rock album, really.
Right.
But it's missing a lot.
There's a funny anecdote, actually. I heard Santana tell this story once in some YouTube video, some interview, and he's talking about Miles, and I guess he was talking to Miles one day, and Miles looks at him, he's like, "You could do more than fucking Black Magic Woman, man."
All Miles had to do
pretty much gets summed up on this one.
All Miles had to do to anyone, it was just like he knew just like a couple words to say to like a musician to like change their entire career. He did that to so many people. That's the name of this podcast, even.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Miles is one of those guys where the people who leave his bands really are like alumni. Frank was that way.
It's like a coaching tree.
Tons of other guys.
Yeah.
Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
Tons of big names like that who were.
Did you say Chick Corea?
Sort of.
He's another.
Yeah, that absolutely, yeah. Just guys with a lot of reach, and who write music to be played by the individual musicians that they've selected for the specific albums, specific recordings.
Mm-hmm.
So Caravanserai is definitely an album that's been really important to me for a long time, since I was probably like 16, 17. Like, some of the most beautiful music ever recorded is on here, in my opinion. Song of the Winds. Look Up to See What's Coming Down. I don't know if it's like it's more up-tempo and kind of a heavy song, but like that is fucking amazing. Like the organ, Greg's organ in the intro, and then when the guitar solo comes in on Look Up to See What's Coming Down, that's like one of my favorite moments in music. And then on side 2, you get that intro with Future Primitive, which is insanely awesome, and like this album,
and
like
build up to Stoneflower is amazing. From
into Stoneflower, I'm transfixed by this album every time I've heard it, and I've probably like over the years I've probably heard it like 30-40 times in full. I adore the shit out of this album. It's a classic. Like, it's
Yeah,
regarded as
I
a
do
masterpiece
too.
by everyone, basically. So.
Yeah. This is one that I heard in high school as well, surprisingly. I've heard this one a long time ago.
Yeah, this and 2 other albums on this list, I pretty much got into them all at the same time. This, Intermounting Flame, and Romantic Warrior. I think this was sort of an introduction to, I don't know, more impressionistic instrumental music, where I think this kind of stuff is best listened to alone and with a lot of attention being paid to it. Like, these are all very rewarding instrumental records that you can really get lost in.
I thought you were going to say with a heroic dose of mushrooms, but
yeah, drugs would help too with everything that Jim just said.
Yeah.
Add drugs as well. One thing that I really love about Caravanserai that I think is spoiler when I piss Jim and Jake off later on in this episode. One thing that I love about this album that I think is lacking in the jazz rock scene in the late 70s is there's space on this album. There's space and there's room on this album. Like, they're not trying to cram in as many notes as possible every 2 bars. They ride out the groove and ride out, like, a lot of these solos aren't even technical. Like, a guitarist could probably learn how to play a lot of these solos pretty easily. But there's, like, this ineffable kind of spiritual quality to this album that is really special, in my opinion. We keep returning to that. I think that's just part of jazz. Yeah. Part of good jazz.
I have no objections to that style, and yeah, some of my favorite music is that. I mean, Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon are some of the spaciest, like, make really great use of space, and I think it's some of the best music ever recorded. I have no problems with that, and I might surprise you with my favorites. That doesn't bother me at all. Like I said, I think there's a niche for this kind of music and a niche for extreme technical virtuosity in jazz. That's the great thing about jazz. I think it's such a versatile genre.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with that discussion on this album either. I mean, the space is one of the things I love the most about this music and about a lot of other music. I just don't think it's a virtue that I would evaluate any given piece of music by.
No, it can be done better or worse. The spaciness can be done better or worse, or technical virtuosity can be done better or worse. Like anything.
Exactly. Like space is obviously one of the goals of the composition for this music. They're very much working to create that space, and they do it really, really well. But on Noonward Race, they're not trying to create space, and that's just fine.
But a track like Noonward Race also, like, is heavy as shit and has, like, a tight ass groove to it, which, like, it's not just like a pure display of technicality. I wouldn't argue that either.
I think pure displays of technicality are very, very rare.
They are rare. I think there's a little bit of it.
That's
on some of the albums we're going to talk about later.
That's computer-generated gent music. That's what pure display.
Yeah, procedurally generated gent.
That's what Jake wishes all music is. So
that's the logical endpoint of music. Just computers.
Singularity music.
Yeah, exactly.
God help us in 30 years when aesthetics are predetermined by
algorithms,
by Jake-based AI.
Oh God! Keep Jake away from all computers.
That's the story of The Astonishing. Funny enough, Petrucci's very worried.
A magnificent book.
Yep, it is. It's great.
A magnificent epic.
The dialogue.
Epic novel.
Me. Yeah. No, yeah,
How the fuck are we talking about The Astonishing right now?
I didn't fucking say anything about it.
Why does it always come back?
100%
Jake.
It relates.
God damn it, Jake.
It relates to everything. I don't know what you mean. No, I think my favorite solo on all of these records is from Song of the Wind. I think that puts me in a meditative state. I described it as giving me, like, solely that. Not that I don't have other reasons to live, but that alone would give me. That's sufficient. That's all I mean. Like, if I can live in a world with that guitar solo, I'm content. It's one of the most beautiful things we've ever heard.
Song of the Wind is
this is a spiritual collection of pieces, man. Caravanserai.
Yeah. If I were to make, like, a top 100 tracks of all time or something, which I would probably never try to do because it would be too hard, but Song of the Wind would definitely be on that without question.
I think so. I think so as well. Yeah, I would agree with you.
There's an awesome recording I watched yesterday of Neil Sean and Santana playing that together from 2017.
Oh shit! I bet that was amazing.
Highly recommended. Yeah,
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, this would be an album I'd love to see played live.
Oh god, yeah. There's not really a lot of live recording available.
Huh.
I have to mention this though. Have you guys heard the what the hell is that album called?
Santana and Paco.
Love Devotion Surrender by it's Santana and McLaughlin.
Ooh.
Well, it's Santana and Mahavishnu Orchestra, the two bands playing together.
Ooh. Is this?
Oh, it's
this
outrageously good.
A concert, like a live show, you said?
Yeah, it's live. It's fucking incredible.
Is it on
dude.
YouTube? Because I have to watch that now. That's.
It's an album. It was released at the time.
Well,
like it was released in the
I've
early
never
70s.
heard of this. I need to.
Oh my god, it's amazing.
Right,
Anthony,
I'm
you
gonna
heard that?
change
I actually haven't. I thought you were going to talk about that Carlos and Paco de Lucia and Al Di Meola album.
Oh, that's a classic too, but that's a totally different style guitar. This is still very much like the early 70s like mushroom jazz rock.
Yeah, that
oh
album
my god, you guys have got to listen to that album.
I will.
It's incredible, man. They riff on Love Supreme, the Coltrane composition.
Oh, God.
In the first track. It's majestic.
Everything you
Gotta
just
check
said,
that out.
I like all of the words.
Absolutely got to check that album out.
The album with Carlos and Al and Paco is that's like a classical album basically. It's like flamenco music. Classical
Like
music.
flamenco or classical. Yeah, exactly.
I guess it's debatable whether or not
only
flamenco
one of them
is
is playing classical guitar, but
is it debatable
I
whether or
don't
not
know.
flamenco is classical? This is more
It's not-
relevant to the Return to
I
Forever
don't know.
album, but or is it like
Could
pretty
be,
much
I mean-
accepted that it's classical?
It's the breakdown of classical, folk, and pop music, right? Those are the three kind of headings. So it can be pop music is whatever. I mean, I just take that at deflationary. It's whatever's popular. It's not written for people in universities or something like that. And folk music is written by just random people or emerges out of like traditions, I guess, or something like that. The lines between all three of those are really blurry, I would say. There's a point at which classical music was popular. I mean,
That's
not
really what I meant. Like generally, like what's considered classical is like stuff that's like taught in like the academy. Like if you took like a classical guitar, if you like got like a degree in like classical guitar performance, would they teach you flamenco music?
I got you. As like a historical, I got you.
I don't know. I mean, probably not automatically, but I'm sure there are faculty somewhere who are specialized in it. I don't know. I mean, honestly, jazz has become classical music in that way in some respect. A lot of where jazz is done now is in universities.
Yeah, and Coltrane called, I think it was Coltrane. Coltrane definitely thought that jazz was a type of classical music. I think he called it African American classical music. I think that was Coltrane who did that. It was one of the big guys who called it that. Yeah,
and it was becoming that way. I think probably with the introduction of bebop, like swing band jazz music, like
it's party music.
I don't know if I would call that. Huh? Yeah, exactly. It's not classical music in the way that something like Ascension is classical music. if we want to break it down that way.
Or Ohm.
Yeah, a lot of crazy. I fucking love Coltrane.
Yeah.
Oh my god, me too.
Dude is a genius.
I mean, I'm not in favor of like the gatekeeping of the academy anyway, but I was just curious if like academic musical spaces consider flamenco to be classical.
I don't really know. I mean, I'm not qualified really to say. I would not be surprised. It's really fucking hard to play. I know that.
Flamenco is defined by like a particular kind of like finger picking technique, right? Isn't that like the definition of it?
It's a way you strum. You like use your whole hand to like you almost flick the strings, and there's a rhythm you develop in your right hand to generate the like the rhythms of flamenco music.
This is a low rent take from Wikipedia. I mean, but it's it says it's based on various folkloric music, but I think a lot of music is based on folkloric music.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how helpful that is. I'm sure it's played in academies somewhere. Yeah, in that sense.
Yeah, I mean,
classical.
flamenco is such a niche type of guitar playing. I don't see a lot of it.
Mediterranean Sundance, the Aldi Meola, is it him and Paco? Is he the 8-second guitarist on there, Paco de Lucia, or is it someone else?
I think it's all Al on Elegant Gypsy.
Now, Mediterranean Sundance is a duo. I know that for a fact.
On Elegant Gypsy?
Yeah, I'm absolutely positive it's a duo. I just don't remember who the second player is. Are they playing flamenco style on that?
Let's find out. Yeah, it looks like it probably is Paco de Lucia. Oh my God, the fucking lineup on Elegant Gypsy.
Mediterranean Sundance.
Di Meola, Paco de Lucia, Jan Hammer,
Barry Miles,
Anthony Jackson, Steve Gadd, Lenny White, not surprising, and Mingo Lewis. That's a cool name.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about
another
Elegant
album
Gypsy.
that could have
Who played on Caravanserai.
Yep.
Look at that. Yeah, just tons. I mean, we're not talking about Elegant Gypsy here, but that's worth just pointing out all the crossover between the lineups on all these albums.
Yeah, Elegant Gypsy by
These
Aldi
guys are all
Meola.
buddies.
It's not part of the starter pack, spoiler alert, but it could be.
It certainly could be.
Yeah,
that's
there's
a
15 other albums that could be on this list.
Yeah. Why don't we move on? Number 3, One Size Fits All by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
The one that Anthony thinks I
1975.
would hate the most for some reason. Couldn't work an
didn't
answer
think you would
on
hate
that.
it.
We thought it would be my least favorite.
This is the Zappa lineup, I think.
It's the classic lineup, yeah.
George Duke and Ruth Underwood. Who else is on here?
The band is Frank, George Duke, Napoleon Murphy Brock, Ruth Underwood on marimba, and other auxiliary percussion. Then you got two drummers, Ralph Humphrey and Chester Thompson.
And Tom Fowler.
Tom Fowler and Bruce Fowler. I think
Fowler
Bruce
on the
Fowler is the
trombone,
trombonist and
yeah.
Tom Fowler is the bassist. Yeah.
And is this the last with this lineup with the Mothers of Invention?
Yes. We still have some of them on Bongo Fury, which comes out after this, but this is the culmination of a few years.
Yeah.
With that lineup.
I didn't notice any other Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention's releases after this, so I wasn't sure if this was the last, at least the last marketed as such.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is the. I think Bongo Fury is listed as Zappa / Mothers, but.
Bongo Fury.
But yeah, the Mothers of Invention title was sort of getting retired, after this. It was all just Frank.
This is some groovy shit.
Yeah, a lot of people say this is the best Frank album.
I can see that. It's not my favorite
I
so
can
far
see
that
it
I've
too.
listened to, but I can see that. I definitely understand it.
I mean, obviously you guys know this. I don't know if the listeners know this, but I'm a bit of a fanatic, and I mean, I would definitely put this in my top 10.
What is your listening habit? Aren't you in less than the 99th percentile, even smaller?
Yeah, I'm in the top half a percentile of Frank Zappa listeners on Spotify, I guess.
Insane. Every year, right?
No big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much every year.
So,
I've been listening to this stuff constantly for, I don't know, 15 years.
What's the first Zappa record you ever heard? I'm actually curious. I don't think I know. Dude, I'm curious. I never understood how you got into them, actually. It's always...
My guitar teacher got me into them.
Oh,
got me into Frank. Probably Watermelon and Easter Hay. It's probably the first thing I heard.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Anthony?
I was going to guess that Joe's Garage was the first Zappa album you heard, because I feel like that's probably the first that a lot of people hear, either that or Apostrophe. The Helsinki concert, which is a show he did in Helsinki, obviously, or I think it's 2 shows that he did with this lineup, which was later released as You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 2, which might be overall, if you include live material, You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 2, the Helsinki concert might be the best Zappa album, honestly. He rips the guitar solo that he improvises on Inca Roads from that live album, and that is the exact same guitar solo just ripped from that live tape on the studio version here, which is... Zappa did a lot of that. He loved doing that, like, studio collage stuff. And I always thought that like, that's one of my absolute favorite Frank solos. Like, he was on some kind of plane when he improvised
that Inca Roads solo is majestic, yeah. And then
that George Duke synth solo that comes in, like, right after, it's like when I listen to Inca Roads, I'm, like, always stunned. I'm like, how is there this much amazing shit, like, in one track? Like, from the first second to the last second, it's like an 8.5 minute track. It's like, how is there that, like, so much incredible shit in one song? Like, Inca Roads is just unbelievable. Like, it's a song that, like, is inexhaustible for me. Like, I can listen to that shit. Like, I find something new in it every time I listen to it. It's one of those songs.
Same. Yeah, it is. And there's tons of recordings of it too. And they've played it. There were a bunch of different arrangements. Like, that song, I think it got debuted as a live song before it was ever on any records, and then it shows up on One Size Fits All in its sort of classic arrangement that you hear in most of the recordings. But they used to play it a bunch of different ways. Like, if you watch they were playing it in the Roxy era. If you watch the Roxy movie, they play Inca Roads, but it doesn't sound much like the recording we hear here on One Size Fits All.
You can tell that it, like, had...
No, I agree. I think it's one of Frank's best solos by far. And Jesus, Dweezil plays a solo on a performance of Inca Roads from, like, 97 that is breathtaking. Oh, it's amazing. I'll put that in the Discord.
Yeah, Frank, like, Dweezil can play just like his dad. He really can. It's insane.
Oh, Dweezil's a better player than Frank. But
oh, really? You think so? In terms of
a better player, he's not a compositional genius like Frank. No offense, Dweezil, but
no. But when you listen to this final, I guess, definitive studio version of Inca Roads, you can tell that it's a song that had been, like, workshopped to death and fine-tuned to a very extreme degree over live shows. You can tell because, like, it's a structurally flawless song, and it's so complicated. Like, I can't even try to explicate Inca Roads. Like, I don't, like, have the vocabulary to really, like, explicate the structure of it, but it's just, like, it's, like, structurally flawless and just insanely complex.
Oh my god, the last 3 minutes of Inca Roads are just like your jaw drops. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, you go on kind of a journey with Frank's solo, and it's not difficult to listen to Frank's solo on this. That solo section is very much in the pocket, very nice, very pleasant. But then the last few minutes are just these blistering bits of classical music that Frank wrote out for this band, and it's ridiculous. I mean, the stuff that Ruth Underwood is doing on the percussion, the lines that George Duke is playing on the keyboards, it's outrageous.
It might be for, like, I don't say this definitively because it's hard to choose, but, like, Inca Roads might be Frank's, like, magnum opus. It might be, like I feel like it's the culmination of so much of what he was trying to do in the first, like, we're still kind of in the first 10 years of his career here, like, kind of closing out the first decade of his career with this album. And I feel like Inca Roads is, like, the culmination of so much of what he was doing.
Yeah, in the band format, I think that's onto something. I mean, obviously with Frank, like, what he was concerned about primarily, I think, was the classical stuff. But in terms of the band format, Inca Roads pretty much sums it up. Inca Roads does, Montana does. There are a bunch of examples like that.
The Montana guitar solo.
I think I preferred the instrumental break in Pajama People better. There's, like, that break around, like, 2 minutes, and it runs for a few minutes there. And Zappa's just playing this crazy fucking solo, and it runs into this rhythm piece, and it's, like, the grooviest shit I think, or some of the grooviest shit I think I've ever heard him play. That's the probably the part of this album that I enjoyed the most.
Pajama
Classic
People is
tune. All these are classic Zappa tunes.
Pajama People. I adore Pajama People. It's kind of, like I'm not really interested in comparing it to Inca Roads because Pajama People is more like a straightforward. It's not like straightforward, obviously, in the grand scheme of music, but it's a more straightforward, just kind of jam session. With some like Frank Zappa absurdist lyrics thrown on top of it. I don't really think it's doing the same kind of stuff as Inca Roads is doing.
It reminds me of the structure of Cosmic Debris. When I listen to that song, there's like the instrumental stuff in the middle, and when I see them play it live, they go ham on it. It's completely different than what you get in the studio track. And I probably prefer
it's also a blues. It's a bluesier tune, like Cosmic Debris.
Yeah, exactly. That's the stuff of Frank I like. That that bass work in Keep It Greasy. That's the kind of Frank that I gravitate toward, I think.
I also love. No one ever talks about it, but I fucking love Evelyn, a Modified Dog. Is it a?
I do too.
Is it an actual harpsichord that George Duke is playing, or is it like a clavinet?
I don't know.
Because
it's probably a clavinet.
I love the lyrics. I think they're really, really clever and funny. Like, I love the lyrics on Evelyn, a Modified Dog. But if you take away the lyrics, like, it's like a pretty amazing, like, short keyboard composition. Like, it's like a pretty stunning.
Typical Frank.
It's like this Baroque kind of Bach-inspired, like, etude, fugue kind of piece that's, like, really amazing. And then, of course, Frank, like, throws the absurdist lyrics on top of it. Which
the first two times
those ascending lines, like those ascending lines, he ascends one line, then descends it the same way, and does it twice. It's fucking beautiful.
It's fucking
But
beautiful.
yeah, I mean that's Frank. Inca Roads, the lyrics are ridiculous. They're ridiculous. Pretty much all of the lyrics on this on almost anything Frank are ridiculous. That's sort of the shtick. It's like, here's this absolutely sublime music, and we're going to talk about a modified dog or aliens.
Yeah, no one does it quite like Frank does.
I still prefer Thingfish to this album. I think Thingfish is his magnum opus, in my opinion. Just lyrically.
I unironically like Thingfish.
I unironically think Thingfish is bad, as do most people.
I think it's one of his more average albums I've heard, but I think it's funny.
Yeah, I mean it's in the bottom core of the discography, but like I said, I'm a fanatic. I like it all.
So tell me, I am curious, Jim. Tell me about your history with One Size Fits All, because I don't recall you really talking much about it back when we first got into Frank in high school.
Let's see. I think this is one of the ones I got more interested in college. I'm trying to think of. I don't really remember the first time I heard this. It's probably college. Probably not the first time I heard it, but the first time I really started listening to this one, putting it in the rotation. Yeah, Inca Roads and Andy, those two tunes have always blown me away on this one.
Who does the vocals on the last two tracks? Is that George Duke? It's not Frank.
No, it's not Frank. Frank doesn't sing. Frank just
talks.
Yeah.
But he does the vocals. But yeah, he doesn't sing. I think it's
kind of sings sometimes.
I don't know.
There's a melody to it, yeah, but I wouldn't.
George Duke doesn't sing much either. It's Johnny Guitar Watson.
Yes.
That's why. I knew that. Wow.
Yeah, I didn't think George Duke sang, but
George Duke doesn't sing much. He does the falsetto vocals on Inca Roads, but he had to kind of get coaxed into doing that. He wasn't interested in singing and didn't have much. He didn't think he could really do it, but Frank encouraged him enough to do the Inca Roads falsetto.
That dude is a freak on the keys. The first time I ever saw him play was that they did that live track. I've mentioned this in other episodes, but that live track of Cosmic Debris, I mentioned it earlier. He does that solo right after. There's I can't remember. I think there's a sax solo, and then George Duke starts playing. There's like this slow build up. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but just some of the shit he does is insane. I always
George Duke was incredible.
Yeah.
May he rest in peace. Another favorite George Duke solo is "Don't You Ever Watch That Thing" on Roxy and Elsewhere.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he tears it up, man. He burns that fucking place down.
And just
solo section.
A second shout out to the George Duke solo at the end of Inca Roads.
Oh yeah,
it deserves
absolutely.
endless shout outs.
Absolutely. Now, I was thinking about this. To what extent is this jazz rock?
I think this is the most clearly jazz rock.
Because, like,
this lineup is the most jazz rock of Frank's career.
It's the most rock for sure. Like, these are the closest things to rock songs, I think, than anything else. And there's an obvious jazz element, but Frank had sort of a contentious relationship with jazz in a lot of ways. There's a good some obscure radio series I listened to a long time ago where they talk about Frank's relationship to jazz music. And I think they talk about how Frank appreciated the technicality, but not really the mystique and general aesthetic of jazz music.
It was hippie
and
bullshit.
I think we see that a lot. We see a lot of that on here, like the blistering technicality, but there, but no mystique. It's like the mask is off.
There's a baseness to Zappa, but it's self-aware. Like, he knows what he's doing with it.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love Frank Zappa. I love Frank Zappa. I'm a huge fan. So I'm not saying anything negative. But I don't come to Zappa if I'm looking for a particular kind of emotional fulfillment in my music. Like, that's not what Zappa gives you. It's not what it gives me.
Yeah.
It's not what gives most... Not.
It does sometimes.
Like, he does have moments, like Watermelon and Easter Hay, I think, does. He has moments.
Black Napkins, I think, is another pretty soulful piece.
The Ensemble Moderne performance of Dog Breath on the Yellow Shark album is gut-wrenching. But I hear you. Like, especially in the more pop-oriented albums like One Size Fits All, where it's a band format, I totally agree.
Yeah, like think about how, like, I don't know, some of the jazz albums we've all listened to together, like I don't know, Bethany and Maze as Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls. Like, think about how that album makes you feel. It's not how a Zappa album makes you feel.
Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. It's just it's not impressionistic really at all. I would struggle I would struggle to come up with a moment of impressionistic Zappa music. Like, it's so purely about the composition with Frank. It's in the notes on the page. That's what Frank cared about.
But I think what makes this particular lineup so great is that obviously the notes on the page is the main focus, but they're playing together with like a very organic chemistry, and so it balances it out a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Balances it out perfectly, honestly.
That's the jazz element. Listen to the way these guys comp when Frank is playing a guitar solo. Like, if you can pay as much attention to the communication between the bandmates while they're playing behind Frank, while they're accompanying Frank's guitar solo, there's as much going on there as there is in anything in the jazz world. They're having a conversation while Frank's playing a solo.
Yeah, and that's what jazz is basically, or at least that's what group jazz is.
Yes.
Is people having a conversation with their instruments, and that's happening on this
album.
Yes. And then solo jazz is like solo improvisation on jazz is like talking, like using your instrument as like a form of speech, really. And then in the group, it's a conversation. Whereas classical and the notes on the page, which is what Frank is more in the, like, Frank as a composer and performer is more in the realm of classical.
Yes.
That's more like writing, whereas jazz is more like talking.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good way to put it. Yep,
yeah.
That's a good distillation. There's a lot of that in Sofa, too. Sofa has, like, a big band feel to it, almost.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I think what Frank was probably trying to go for was, like, that kind of, like, end of the night at, like, a jazz club, like, empty cocktail glasses with the ice clanking, like Casablanca, play it again, Sam kind of vibe. I think that's what he was trying to riff on Sofa.
Caravan with the drum solo, on America Drinks and Goes Home.
Yeah, Frank loves like right. 40s music, 40s and 50s music. It's all over all of his entire career. So, and Sofa is definitely doing that.
Frank is as much a doo-wop artist as anything else.
He loves doo-wop. Yeah.
It's really weird. I think they capture that element of Sofa the best, probably on Zappa in New York, when they've got the Brecker brothers on sax and trumpet.
Yeah. Sofa, I do love Sofa, but it's never been one of my favorite Frank songs. It doesn't really stick with me as much. But I know a lot of people feel differently. A lot of people call Sofa like one of his best pieces, which I wouldn't say is wrong, but it doesn't really quite make as much of an impression on me as some of his other like major tracks.
It kind of bridges the classical side to the band side, I think. Yeah.
San Bernardino is also a great, like, that's basically like that's a blues rock song pretty much 100%, and I love San Bernardino.
Yep.
There's another one that I enjoyed, which
great rockin' outro.
That's my Zappa.
All right, let's move on to number 4. Romantic Warrior by Return to Forever.
This is some nerdy shit, some Dungeons and Dragons shit.
I love that about it.
Me
Our
too.
friend on Rate Your Music does not love that about it.
No, he hates that about
He doesn't love it to a somewhat concerning degree for his mental health.
I was worried about the guy. He was really angry about it.
He's really mad.
No, let's not talk about him anymore.
I goddamn love Romantic Warrior. I've been listening to this for a long time. This has been in my rotation for a very long time. I love the songs on here.
This is
it's four guys.
Yeah.
You got to keep in mind this is 4 guys making this record too.
I listened to this a lot cooking dinner back when you showed it to me. I think we did when we did that like proto raw beef thing. This was I think it was in your top 25.
Yeah.
And so the first time I got to listen to it, and I've spun it a lot since then. I really like this stuff. It's great.
Yeah, I think this is the quintessential Chick Corea album, but I could see why people would disagree with me on that.
I feel really good when the medieval overture starts, like that weird keyboard that comes in right at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what that keyboard sound is.
I don't know either, but it makes me feel really good whenever it starts.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's really catchy and funky sounding. Yeah.
The very, very beginning of Medieval Overture?
Yeah, that first keyboard riff in the beginning of Medieval Overture.
I'm pretty sure it's some kind of Moog. I'm pretty sure.
Probably.
Yeah, I don't know.
So let's get the lineup on here. It's Chick Corea, obviously, who's Chick Corea on the piano and keyboards, and Stanley Clarke on the bass. They're kind of the core of Return to Forever throughout the discography. And then Al Di Meola on guitar and Lenny White on drums. So probably smallest lineup of any of the albums we're talking about tonight, which definitely doesn't subtract from what they're doing, because they definitely pack it in despite a fairly small lineup. The fact that it is just 4 guys is pretty goddamn impressive.
Yeah, so this is probably the most purely technical album of any of the ones we're talking about tonight, I think. Do we agree on that?
Yes.
Well, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means.
There's not a lot of space on this album.
There's 0.
I think that's true.
I think that's true.
I don't think there's zero. I don't think there's 0 space. There's space and there's tons of space in the title track.
Well, yeah, I mean,
there's a decent amount of space in Sorceress.
In Sorceress, there's
space in Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant.
There's
music
0.
Would be almost unlistenable if there is no space. So there's definitely space.
There's basically 0 space in Majestic Dance and The Magician. Those 2 tracks basically have 0 space. Those two tracks I've never really cared for that much, and when I listened to this again yesterday, I still don't really like them that much. I am not crazy about Majestic Dance or The Magician. Those runs were like, there are runs like towards the end of Majestic Dance, like there's this run where they're just playing notes. They're just like doing crazy weird like clusters of notes. Like that's what they're doing. They're like, that's what they're doing. That's all they're doing.
I don't know what that means. I don't
It's
know
like
what that means.
it's, and I mean, like intellectually, it's interesting. Like if I were to like try to like study like what exactly they're doing and why it's hard to play, like that's interesting. I'm not like shitting on that. I don't think that's bad inherently, but it doesn't really like connect with me very much. Those moments on this album. Do you know the part I'm talking about? Like the end, like the
I know the exact line you're talking about. Yeah,
I could do without that.
I don't know.
Stuff.
I think
I don't know.
It's lighthearted, honestly. Like it's just a lighthearted little motif that they composed and thought, hey, that's kind of interesting. Let's find a place to throw that in.
Yeah, but
like it's like some of the crazy shit that happens at the end of Inca Roads. Honestly, just little motifs that are tight, short, that you find a way to fit into the greater piece, which is the album at large.
Yeah, and quantitatively, it's not that different. I agree from like what's in some like certain Frank Zappa songs, but qualitatively, which is really what art is and what music is, it's a little sterile in my view, and a lot of people agree with me about this album. So it's not like I'm not saying you guys are wrong, but it's not like I'm like totally insanely out to lunch.
I don't understand.
I don't know. I've always been kind of allergic to that notion of
sterility. I don't know what that. I don't really know what that means. Yeah, I struggle to understand the. I could understand why someone doesn't like it, but I don't really understand what it means for the music to be sterile.
I'm with Jake on that one, man.
I see. And I mean, maybe it's a different format, but I like watched Chick play like Got a Match Live with John Patitucci, and there's like no space in that. John Patitucci plays this amazing, like insane, like frenetic bass solo, and he's just improvising, and Chick Corea's got these like wild accompaniments going on, but I don't see how that's sterile. I think there's a lot of room for like live composition and things going on there. So I disagree with the description, but I can understand why people don't like it.
I think it's fun. I think it's jovial. You watch guys play lines like that, and if they're really good, they're playing it very lightly. They're playing it very lightly, and they can do that lightly because they're so technically proficient.
They're all smiling.
They can do it easily. So they play hard lines like that, and they're smiling like we're making this work somehow. I don't really know how, but
that piece
I'm
talking about, they're all looking at each other smiling.
And
Chick's like laughing. I
know that line.
Works. Yeah.
I know that line you're talking about in. I think it's The Magician. Like at the very end of the tune. Like I can imagine them playing that together and just smiling like, wow, this is insane.
Yeah, and I guess I just don't understand what it means for it to be sterile. But again, I definitely understand why someone might not prefer that level of like packing that much into that much space or something like that.
Music of that style is not inherently sterile. I do think it's a bit sterile at points on this album, though. And again, like watching them do it live and like knowing that they can do it easily and that's impressive. Like I'm not taking away from that. That's cool. And for a long time as a music fan, like when I was younger, that's like all I wanted. Like growing up as like a hardcore progressive rock fan, like I was a sucker for that. That's all I wanted. And I've kind of burned out on it a little bit, honestly. And I still love a lot of stuff of that style. Like everything we've been talking about tonight is of that style, and I love it. But it kind of like it jumps the shark a little bit on this album, in my opinion. And I know other people agree with me. So
I don't think they jumped the shark. I think this is.
It's subjective, and I'm not like I know that this album like does a lot for both of you. I know you both love it. I'm not trying to like shit on it or like say you're wrong or anything. But a lot of it doesn't really do that much for me.
Look, I mean, I've got it. I'm gonna spoil part of my rankings. I have it at number 4, so it's not my favorite of these. I'm really just like fixated on the claim. Like I just don't really understand the claim, like the language you're using to describe it. That's probably on me. I'm just not understanding it. I'm obviously not a musician, so I can't really say what they're doing. But to my ears, Mahavishnu is, to my ears, sounds more technical, fast-paced than this does. Like this, I'm much more relaxed and like sitting back listening to this stuff. And maybe that's the jovial element you're talking about, James. Like I think it's more fun. Like it's not a serious record, maybe. Like that's how I feel when I'm listening to it. But McLaughlin's playing on and Billy Cobham's playing on Intermounting Flame. To my ears, sounds more technical. That doesn't mean it's more technical, but that's just how that comes off to me, I guess.
There's no way to quantify this stuff, and even if you could, I don't think it would be desirable to try to. So, like, if the way that the impression it makes on you is really what's important. That's a totally fair perspective. And I like Romantic Warrior. I'm not like, I feel like I've mainly said negative stuff about it. I really like Romantic Warrior. I think Sorceress is awesome. It's super groovy. Stanley Clark's bass playing, a lot of amazing bass solos. Like Stanley Clark is probably the highlight of this album for me. I think he's awesome. Like, I like this album. I really, really like it. I would probably give it like an 8 out of 10. And if I was trying to be like really critical, the lowest I would ever go with it would be a 7 out of 10. Like, I'm not saying I don't like it. I think it's excellent. But there are parts of it that keep it from like me considering it like a masterwork for the reasons that I explained. I like Chick Corea's early stuff, like the self-titled Return to Forever album and Light as a Feather. I like that stuff a lot better, personally.
I do love that stuff, yeah.
I love that stuff too. I love pretty much all things Chick Corea, but this has always been the one I've come back to. Yeah, I mean, and we're also not really, we're not talking about the core of the album with songs like The Magician or Majestic Dance. The core is Sorceress and the title track Romantic Warrior, Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant. That's where that's where I think the meat of the album is.
Well, and one thing that I think this really has going for it, maybe superior to the other entries here, is the use of like really bright and even sometimes catchy melody. So you're whistling the Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant before. And immediately resonated with me. Like, that's just such a feel-good melody. A lot of the melodies in this album, I think, are like superior, or not superior, but like outstanding. I don't know. That's something that really draws me in with this record. I don't know. I think it has a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Chick Corea is a master composer.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing that he does on the title track, which is awesome. And it's the same live. They probably did like some overdubbing with the tape, but on the title track, like he's trading off lines, like, and it sounds like there are two players. Like, it's very conversational. Like, it sounds like two players trading off, but it's obviously all Chick. And do you know what I'm talking about with those piano lines on the title track? That's a huge.
I've seen him do that live.
I love that.
Yeah. He does that. He'll do that with the other musicians, and he'll do that with himself too. It's like he's like chatting with someone while he's playing. It's really cool.
It's like like when you hear like virtuoso pianists talk about their playing, like they often talk about like the relationship between their two hands, and like that's definitely happening on the title track, Romantic Warrior. Like his left hand is like in conversation with his right hand, in a very explicit way, and it's really cool.
Though I'm wondering now, going back to this review, and I'm only reason I bring it up is because people have maybe a certain impression about the aesthetic of this album. Without the album cover, I don't know that I would have had any medieval imagery going on in my head. It's placed there.
I definitely would. I think. I mean, I don't know, but I honestly that line we were just talking about in The Magician. Is what conjures up that image for me.
Maybe.
Not really the title track, not really Sorceress. The first track, definitely.
It's this
Duel of the Jester and the Tyrant, I think.
Fantasy, I would say, is on the album, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I wonder if it's implied, like suggested, and it's implanted there. But maybe. It'd be tough to know. That'd be a cool...
Yeah, I mean, we can't
I would love to see a study done on that, like in social psychology, like how much of like that is like suggested. I'm sure there's literature on that, but I really... I don't... If I like close my eyes and listen to this, I can, I don't know. I don't really know what I think about when I listen to it, but without looking at the cover, I don't get as much of that.
It's not
It's-
really
it's
a mood
instrumental
album
music,
either
so-
way, though. So I don't get like any kind of strong like extra musical aesthetic from it either way. But if I had to assign one to it, Fantasy is would be it. I think that it matches up with the album art in that regard. It's a nerdy album.
Maybe.
It definitely is, which isn't a bad
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
But it
is.
this is a dorky ass
It is.
album.
It definitely is.
Maybe a little too
I
much.
love that about it. That's one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, I love that
yeah,
too.
no, same. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to number 5 here?
I knew that was going to be the most polarizing one we talked about, but that was an interesting conversation.
I've known all these albums. Me and Jim, I don't think Jake has, but me and Jim have known all these albums since we were teenagers, so we know this stuff really well. So
I actually didn't get into this last album here, which is, for the record, Enigmatic Ocean by Jean-luc Ponty. I didn't get into this until my last year at college. I
heard this as a teenager. I heard the Mahavishnu stuff as a teenager. I heard the Santana stuff as a teenager. The other two were more recent.
I'm sure you heard this in high school, Jim. Did you not?
Maybe. I don't remember this until I was working at Hometown Music. Stephen Little and I used to listen to this all the time.
Still a long time ago. Like, the two of us have
Yeah, still a long time ago now.
known all
Jesus.
these albums.
So I
for a long
love-
time.
But
I love JLP, but to me, the star of
I
this
do
album
too.
is Ralph Armstrong. He plays so many funky, there are just some straight funk bass lines being played on this.
yeah, I mean,
record.
dude, the rhythm section is like a disco band on this album.
Yeah. The part three, the title track, that is a funk riff on the bass that he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in every song,
No.
obviously, but like Trans Love Express, that is a disco dance
yeah.
beat.
Yeah.
yeah,
it's
like
so
and
good.
it's fucking, and it's beautiful.
And Steve
this
Smith
point-
playing along with the drums too. Yeah, they hold it down, man. That's like my favorite part of these records, I think.
at this point in 77, like, this stuff is really mainstream. Like, this is a mainstream album here, like, released on Atlantic Records. This is a big budget mainstream album here. It wouldn't be in 2022, but in 1977,
Yeah.
Well,
obviously there's stuff that's nothing like this in the mainstream. Yeah, let's do the lineup.
So we have obviously Jean-luc Ponty on the violin. I think it says here he plays piano as well on Nostalgic Lady, which is interesting to know.
Every jazz musician also plays piano.
Well, that's true. I just didn't know he played it on this record. Alan Holdsworth, that's like maybe the big draw there. Although Daryl Stearmer, I think he holds his own to Holdsworth.
Is he the guy that plays on Cosmic Messenger? And he's on part of this.
He's
album.
not. I don't think he's on
solo
Cosmic.
on
There's
Trans
two
Love
different
Express.
guitarists on Cosmic Messenger who are also really good. Their names are eluding me at the moment. But on this record, I think Daryl holds up to Holdsworth, which is a tall task. Alan Zavad on the organ and synthesizer, and of course Ralph Armstrong on the bass, and then Steve Smith, who was also part of Journey at one point on the drums.
Steve Smith
Alan
is the
Zavad
drummer
played
for
with Frank
Journey.
for a while.
Steve Smith is the drummer
Alan
for
Zavad-
Journey, like, during their big period. Like, Steve Smith is is the drummer on Don't Stop Believin', and he's also the drummer on this. It's very weird.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
This is dirt nasty drumming on this album,
Oh,
dude.
fuck,
Jesus.
yeah.
He's throwing it down, man.
Rhythm section.
honestly, dude,
I agree.
We haven't talked much. We talked about Billy Cobham a lot, but like the drummers on all these albums are just disgustingly good.
Absolutely.
Like very, very, very musical, very important to the integrity of all the compositions.
There's a lot of character in there playing too, I think, and all distinct character as well.
Yeah, shit. We didn't even mention this, but Anthony and I saw Return to Forever with Jean-luc Ponty in 2011.
Yeah, what was the lineup?
Demiola wasn't playing guitar. It was Frank Gambale, but otherwise, it was the Romantic Warrior lineup with Jean-luc Ponty.
Yeah, it was a 5-piece. It was Chick, who died last year. So
It was
we got
Chick,
to see
Lenny White on drums, Stanley Clark, Jean-luc Ponty, and Frank Gambale played guitar, who played with Chick in the 80s in the Chicory Electric Band.
I remember
who
Frank
is
Gambale
also
didn't
outrageously good.
do that many solos during that show. I think he only did like one, if I remember.
Well, I'm sure that one was very, very good.
Stanley Clarke did a lot of really long bass solos during that show. That show was definitely a highlight of my concert history.
One of the coolest shows I've ever seen.
And I remember Stanley Clarke was they gave him so much time and attention during that show. He did so many solos. Stanley might have even done more solos than Chick during that show.
I remember the two of them being the stars.
Yeah, and I mean they're
which
return
sense.
to forever. Really, they're the core is Chick and Stanley, so makes sense.
I remember Lenny White went on a rant about man music.
And boy bands.
Saying that he was talking shit about Justin Bieber. He was like, Justin Bieber's a pussy. We're playing real man music.
And he was like
awesome.
He was like, they called him. He said some really boomer ass thing, which not talking shit about him, but he said this very boomer thing where he was like, they call them boy bands, but nobody even plays an instrument, but it's a band. I don't understand that. It's not a band.
I bet the crowd loved it.
Everyone in the crowd
I'm with Dr. White.
The crowd went wild, including us because we were 17.
Yeah, we 17-year-olds, and then all of the dudes in their 60s with their T-shirts tucked in also lit up in the audience.
The crowd went goddamn wild when he said that. Do you remember that?
Fuck yeah. It was awesome, man.
I think post-ironic James would still like it. He might just not go off with the rest of the crowd.
I resent that is a category of my being.
There's obvious divisions in your life, and that's one of them.
The part of James that loves Grant McDonald is the post-ironic James.
No, that's the Gnostic part of me that loves Grant McDonald.
That's the part we don't talk about, and it's all in the casino. It's all in the casino in Maryland, so we don't talk about that
Jesus. Quick shout out, by the way, to Rachel Sloop from Lifetime Fitness for hooking me up with those free tickets to Return to Forever.
Yeah, we got that shit
because
for
her
free.
Her aunt worked for was the promoter for Merriweather Post Pavilion, and she was like, "You ever need tickets? Let me know." I was like, "Hey, but seriously, can I get some tickets to Return to Forever?" She's like, "Yeah, here you go," and then we went.
Yeah, my dad was with us too. It was the four of us.
Yeah, man. Nice. With Ian, our buddy Ian.
That shit was spur of the moment, if I recall. It was
the rhythm guitarist
almost
for
day of, I think, or the day before. You were like, I have 4
Pretty
tickets
much.
to Return to Forever. It's like, okay, yeah, we're going.
Yeah. Well, I told that girl at work. I was like, hey, can you actually get these tickets? And she's like, yeah, I should probably be able to hook that up. Let me talk to my aunt. And I kind of let it go. I was like, all right, well, that's probably not going to happen, but. And then I remember she was like, hey, do you still want those? I've got them. And then we went and saw them.
And that was at
shout out again, Rachel Sloop.
And that was at Merriweather Post Pavilion of Animal Collective fame. A truly legendary venue.
They did that.
I'd love to see another show there.
They did that. Yeah. I saw Coheed and Cambria there in 2005.
Fuck yeah. The very first show I ever went to, which was Prog Nation 2009, that was there. I love Merriweather Post. That's always a venue that'll be
That's right.
dear to my heart.
Yeah, that's a great venue. As far as those big outdoor amphitheaters go, I love Merriweather Post.
Would you take Red Rocks or Merriweather Post? I've never been to Red Rocks.
Are you actually asking?
Yeah, which do you think is a better venue?
You've never been to Red Rocks, so you're not actually asking. Yeah, I mean, it's no contest. Red Rocks is the best venue on earth.
On earth?
That I've been to.
Oh, so you don't think it's overrated or anything?
That is the coolest place. That is the coolest place ever to see a show.
Yeah, I need to make it there at some point.
It's incredible. You guys should come out this summer. We'll find a show worth going to over there.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Anyway, back to
returning to Enigmatic Ocean, though. Yeah, returning to Enigmatic Ocean. This album is interesting because there's a lot of this very esoteric kind of composition. Like the overture is very weird. It's just the relationship between the notes. I mean, the scales they're playing in are not not very common. But then you go into these disco vamps like on Trans-Love Express.
There's a pop sensibility to this.
Yeah, or like Mirage, there's like there's a driving real rock element to it with tons of solos and big production. So it's very interesting because there's just such a huge dynamic range, both in terms of the actual loudness of the music as well as the dynamics of the composition. It's very academic and classical at certain moments and very pop oriented at others.
And I think the production value on this I think I think actually different from Cosmic Messenger, because if you go to listen to that, it's much more like turned down. It's a much quieter album in general than this is. I've listened to him back to back many times, and that's a very noticeable thing. So I definitely agree with what you said. Do you guys get a sort of melancholic feeling listening to some of this stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
so
God, yes.
Mirage, which is an all-time favorite song of mine. That's one of the earliest songs I can remember listening to, and I absolutely love that song. And when JLP comes in with the fiddle, and it just starts screaming, as the bass is playing.
Oh yeah. Dude, that bass line. Oh my God, that bass line in Mirage is sick. Oh my God, that's a sick bass line.
The violin is just the violin is just a melancholic instrument inherently.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Bluegrass, it can be really happy in bluegrass music, but
hence the world's smallest violin trope.
Yeah,
violin's very
universally acknowledged as a melancholic instrument. And even though this album, the compositions of this album are pretty much all up tempo. A lot of them, as we mentioned, are like disco songs almost, but emotional depth is added just due to the nature of the violin as an instrument, and the fact that Ponty is a masterful violinist. It balances it out, and I think even though there are moments of this album that I think are a little bit sort of, I'm going to trigger you, bros, by saying this. There are moments of this album that I think are kind of sterile in the way that I said parts of Romantic Warrior are sterile, but not very many moments, because I think that just the fact that Ponty is such an emotional player throughout the album mitigates that wherever it might happen. I definitely
not
agree.
to get back into it. This is so very different from Romantic Warrior. I think these are very, very different albums. So then I really don't know what that means, but in any case,
I don't think they're that different albums. They're the exact same style of music, literally the exact same genre.
I don't know. I think they're very different compositionally. The instruments that are featured, like I said, I think this has much more of a popular appeal and is much more. I think it's much more palatable upon a first listen. I think it's really easy for people.
I would expect more. Yeah,
people to listen to it for the first time and go, "Wow, that's catchy. That's nice. Oh, that's got a good rhythm." Stuff that people can pick up on very easily. Whereas with Romantic Warrior, I don't know. They're why are you outside of your basement showing this to me? That's the kind of the vibe of that.
I would expect more people to like this too.
Obviously,
I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any Majestic Dance / Magician moments on this album.
Part one of the title track, I think, kind of is like that. The beginning of the title track.
I think so.
I love this album, though. I love this album. I'm not saying...
Oh, my God, I love
I'm
this
saying,
album. The follow-up Cosmic Messenger, too.
I'm making a very
slight...
favorite.
I prefer that one. Yeah.
I'm making a very slight criticism.
I like this one better if for no other reason than Holdsworth.
Yeah. Holdsworth holds it down on this, man.
Don't forget Stroomer.
You get some... Honestly, shit, dude. You get some of the first tastes of, classic Holdsworthian guitar playing on this album, too, because we didn't really have solo albums from him yet. The classic Holdsworth solo albums are from the 80s. And, before that, he was doing stuff with Soft Machine. You see him in Gong. But it's not like what he's playing on this. I mean, he's playing classic outside Holdsworth guitar on some of this stuff.
So we know JLP he played with Mahavishnu Orchestra. He played with Frank, and you said he played with, at least in a live setting, played with Return to Forever. Did he ever play with Santana? That would be an interesting. I don't know how many of these people have played in all the groups we've talked about. That would be interesting to know.
I don't know.
If you told me that Jean-Luc Ponty had played with Santana, I would believe you instantaneously. But I don't think he did. He could have, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
It would make like a lot of sense. But I don't think so.
Yeah, quick
Sound like
Google
an idiot
search
if you
doesn't
ever
show
do.
up much, so I
I'm not showing
highly
anything.
doubt. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
I'm not
still well
showing
traveled. I
anything.
mean, he's mixed up in all of these lineups with all these people. Like he knows most of the guys from these lineups.
Yeah, I think Jean-Luc Ponty actually had a lot to do with one of my favorite Frank songs, which is King Kong.
I love King Kong.
I'm not sure what the extent of his contribution is there.
And Little Umbrellas, of course. That's Jean-Luc Ponty on violin.
Oh yes. I love Little Umbrellas.
Zavod's synth solo on Mirage. I don't know if I would definitively say it's my favorite moment on the album, but it might be. I like that synth solo on Mirage is tasty. It is like fucking scrumptious, that synth solo.
I think Ponty's solo on Mirage is probably my favorite part of the album.
Mirage overall, I think, is my favorite track on the album.
Yeah.
Which isn't to decry the other
That
tracks. But
was
Mirage
the
is
big
my
song
favorite.
from that one too.
That was what?
Yeah, Mirage was I think Mirage was a single.
That makes sense. It's a masterpiece. Yeah. That song.
Absolutely.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, lads. Should we rank these things?
And an honorable mention.
Oh, yeah,
A lot to choose from. I can go first if you guys want to look
yeah,
for
go
your
for
honorable
it.
mentions.
I'm thinking
This is hard. This is really hard. At 5, I will go with One Size Fits All by Frank Zappa. 4, I'll go with Romantic Warrior. 3, I'll go with The Inner Mounting Flame. 2, Enigmatic Ocean. And 1, Caravanserai. And I have to mention, because I didn't say this earlier, but Caravanserai by far has the best album artwork. It's beautiful to look at. I love looking at that album artwork.
that is a beautiful album artwork.
Yeah. And can't believe we didn't mention that, but yeah, that's really nice. And then my honorable mention would be What If by Dixie Dregs, because I want to give Steve Morse a shout in this. The dude's an absolute freak. So that's a very more jazz sensibility for Morse. So that's my honorable mention.
And what's cool about Dixie Dregs is the country element.
Yeah, it's nice.
I saw Dixie Dregs a couple of years ago.
My dad's seen them twice, and it's
amazing,
it's really annoying. Yeah.
So you were like,
all right, I'll give this a shot.
Jake would. I have to make a comment.
What's up?
I predicted that Jake would choose One Size Fits All as his least favorite of the 5. He was like getting all huffy that I thought that, and then he actually did. So
yeah, no,
I
never
go
said
salty?
that I would. Because I didn't know. I didn't know why you would assume that would be my least favorite.
But it was. I was
curious
right.
I was just.
You were getting all salty about it, and then I was right. You disgust me.
Well, I know. If you're gonna say something, I was just curious why you were saying it. That's why you just said something and didn't explain yourself.
Jake is an unpredictable mystery, Tone.
All right, fuckers, make your jokes.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jake disgusts me utterly. I hate him so much. Now let's hear Jim's rankings.
Yeah, fuck this podcast. We're out. Rankings. Jeez. This really is tough. Anthony, you go first.
Okay, my rankings.
about
I'm pretty positive of them. Number 5 is Romantic Warrior. Number 4 is Enigmatic Ocean. Number 3 is The Inner Mounting Flame. 1 and 2 are basically equal, but if I have to choose, 2 would be Caravanserai and 1 would be One Size Fits All. Is that the ranking you thought I'd have, Jake?
Basically, I thought I had your 1 and 2 flipped, but it was pretty close. Yeah.
You got an honorable mention on these, by the way?
I'd go with We'll Talk About It Later by Nucleus. Give Ian Carr a shout out.
Nice.
All right, I'm ready. 5-1. Enigmatic Ocean, Caravanserai, Romantic Warrior, Inner Mounting Flame, One Size Fits All.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mind you, all of those, I'd have all these are perfect fives in my opinion.
Me too. Yeah.
And honorable mention would be, I don't know how the fuck to pronounce it, but June Oil by Slush, French-Canadian group, put out 2 albums in the mid-'70s. Tone turned me on to that in high school, and I've returned to that album so many times. It's incredible.
Yeah, and that band name is Slush.
Also very melancholic. Jesus Christ, that album is just gut-wrenching.
That band is
I'm gonna
Slush.
plug.
That band is Slush, S-L-O-C-H-E in French.
Yep.
So, and the album is June de Lay, I think. J-U-N.
Although I think that slush means the same slush that English speakers think about.
Yeah, but
Yes, it does.
for anyone who may listen to this and wants to Google that band, it's S-O-L-C-H-E. And they only put out 2 albums.
S-L-O.
S-L-O.
S-L-O-C-H.
S-L-O-C-H-E.
Yeah,
Is
S-L-O-C-H-E.
that not what I said?
You said S-O-L.
You said Solch.
Oh.
I'm renaming K-Porus Solch.
Do it. But that band is amazing. They only put out 2 albums, and they're both some of the best jazz rock that there is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, I love those albums.
Yeah, James had me listen to that last year. That was fun. It's weird, but it was fun.
Yeah,
Oh, another jazz rock shout out that a lot of people might not know, which I think is another Quebec band. They might be French, but I think they're a Quebec band. Manige, M-A-N-E-I-G-E. They have an album called Les Porches, Lesporches. That's a masterpiece jazz rock album too that a lot of people probably don't know.
They're really
about.
good. Agreed. I also, since we're doing 2, I have to plug Spectrum by Billy Cobham. That album slaps. It's really good.
Yeah, Spectrum is incredible. Basically, look at any of the members of these 5 albums. They probably have solo albums too.
Yeah.
Those are all honorable mentions. Oh yeah, by Jan.
I don't think there's
Homer
any
is also
overlap
awesome.
with Dixie Dregs, which is one of the reasons I picked them, but also
Yeah.
because they have Steve Morse.
Yeah, that's why I picked Nucleus.
Speaks for itself.
Alrighty. Well, there's your 70s jazz rock starter pack. That's a fucking banger lineup, man. If I could only listen to these 5 albums for the rest of my life, that wouldn't be that bad.
It wouldn't be
good, but it wouldn't be that bad.
Wouldn't be that bad. Tolerable.
All right. We will catch all of you devoted fans next time.